like one of the biggest macro trends that happened for employees in general is that the workforce started to value the authenticity of leadership as one of the top values of the entire workforce. Like, I want to work for a leader that I believe is like an authentic person. And that would be merged with things like, I want to work for a company that does something meaningful. I want to have personal growth. Like, those are some of those value shifts that happen in the workforce. And I think in response to that, a lot of leaders were like, okay, great. Now I'm going to try to check a box and be like, I'm authentic. I'm doing the work. But I think the hard truth, and my book actually talks about this. I have a whole chapter on this topic, but like, there is no magic answer to becoming an authentic leader. It is genuinely the combination of doing the work to become an authentic person and applying solid leadership principles and tactics, and like finding that balance.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we look at a topic that we don't talk a lot about, but authenticity and leadership. Why are they so important today? And what does it really mean? How do you make sure that you're being an authentic leader? Well, today we combine this together in our conversation with Adam Weber. He is an evangelist for 15.5. They measure employee engagement. He shares his story on here and sort of the background of what measuring culture really is and how he got there. But we also talk about authenticity and leadership. That is our primary topic today, and I really am excited to share this with you. What I like most about today's interview with Adam is his crystal thoughts of, what does it take and what is it? And some of the very tactical ideas that you can take and implement from today's conversation are very present. All you have to do is pay attention, and hopefully you'll lean in and get what I enjoyed out of this conversation with Adam. My name is Gene Hammett. I am an executive coach. We have a leadership development platform that we turn managers into leaders, and all that combined is to help you grow your company. Now, you may be curious about how we could actually serve you if we don't know who you are, don't know your industry. Well, I found that that's exactly the reason why we're able to do this, because we're a third party. We're not sucked into the day-to-day, and we can do assessments and we can do any kinds of conversations that allow us to really add value to our clients. And if you're curious about that, the first place I would step to is the Leadership Effectiveness Evaluation, which is where we codify and measure leadership. Our guest today is talking about measuring culture. Well, how do you measure leadership? We've got 7 dials. You want to make sure that you understand what those dials are, know where you stand in your team, and you can prioritize what's next for leadership across the organization. Just go to just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today for the Leadership Effectiveness Evaluation. And you have to just mention that you heard it on the podcast to get it for free. Otherwise, it costs money. But if you heard it on the podcast, just go to fill out the form and say that you heard it on the podcast, or just tell me. And it's absolutely free. The Leadership Effectiveness Evaluation, the 7 dials, will guide you in a customized, personalized way to be the leader that your team deserves. genehammett.com. Schedule your call today. Now, here's the interview with Adam. Adam, how are you?
Hey, Gene, I'm doing great.
I'm excited about our conversation. We're going to kind of jump around a lot of different places. We are going to talk about authenticity. We're going to talk about your book, and we're going to talk about some of the other things that are going on, and your podcast, HR Superstars. Tell us just a little bit more about what we need to know professionally about you.
Sure. Well, I'm a 2-time founder. I spent the last 12 years building companies, building software as a service companies. And my last one was called Amplify. It was an employee engagement measurement company. And so we measured cultures, and then we coached executive teams on how to build great cultures, how to build high performance teams. And I was fortunate enough to sell my business 2 years ago to a company called 15.5, which is where I'm now the chief evangelist. And I talk about culture. I talk about leadership and the leadership journey. And I really try to help show the market that there is kind of this win-win path that's available where you can be good to your employees, you can lead the way that you want to lead, and you can unlock teams that are great. And so I guess that's me. That's me professionally in a nutshell. That doesn't get into the pickleball and all the other things, outside of work. But yeah, that's me.
Well, we're going to stay on the professional side today, as interesting as pickleball is.
We'll spare everybody.
Adam, I I love the background, two-time founder, and measuring culture. My first thought of this is, how do you even do that? So I want to ask you this question. Like, it's a very tall task to measure something that's not quite as clear as measuring sales, measuring number of meetings on the calendar, or all the KPIs that a lot of companies focus on. So what did you learn about measuring culture that you can share with us today?
Yeah, at the heart, the thing that we measured was in the state of engagement of an organization. So if you think about an individual, what makes them motivated to bring their best to work every day? Not just to show up and not quit, but like actually to kind of use their discretionary effort toward pushing the business forward. And so we worked with researchers at lots of different universities and deconstructed in a modern way what the modern worker cares about. So it was things like leadership authenticity, which we're going to talk about, the purpose, like alignment to the company's purpose. Do I have role clarity? Can I achieve my goals here? And we really came up with 17 different drivers that, simply put, what breaks cultures and what creates disengagement at companies is when teams of people all have a common issue. So what I'm like, here's like the most common story I've seen play out literally hundreds of times. First time manager was a top individual contributor, gets thrust into management. The company has no training program in place at all. They just kind of throw them out there. The manager gets overstressed, doesn't know how to give feedback, doesn't know how to run one-on-ones, all those things, right? And so then the team starts saying, one of the main drivers, I have an issue with my manager. Two, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing every day. And three, another driver, feedback. I'm not getting any feedback on what to do better. And so you just create this vicious cycle. And so what we did was we basically took this thing that used to be gut feel, intuition, and we demystified it. We put in a beautiful dashboard, and you can kind of see, and 15.5 now has all this, by the way, but it's like you can see kind of where there are patterns inside the org at the macro level where you can take data and turn it into predictable actions that will fix turnover, drive performance, that sort of thing.
That's what I was expecting to hear. And I know it's not easy because you're measuring something that's sort of in the heart and sort of in the mind and doubt. And we're doing a similar kind of thing within leadership for our clients because that's where we focus. But measuring culture, I commend you in the work that you've done and being able to create this into a platform and sell it. Good on you. Say, Adam, I do want to talk about leadership authenticity, but you said something in there about manager skills. I know you talked about feedback and one-on-one. You mentioned a couple other things. What are the top concerns that employees are having, through the work that you guys look across, I would imagine, thousands and thousands of companies that managers need to be aware of that they just aren't quite aware of, their blind spots?
Well, one, blind spots, my goodness, management, leadership, like that is a bit of the journey. And as you know, probably through the work that you do, like the further you progress in your career, the more blind spots you have because the more people lie to you. And the reason they lie is because you've got role power and they don't feel safe being transparent. And that kind of begins with your very first management job. And I think the most common early blind spots are two things. One is you manage people the way that you yourself, what was motivating to you, instead of managing each individual as individuals. And so by that, you're getting to know their goals, you're getting to know their personalities, you're getting to know what matters in their world, and then you're crafting development for that one person. And we've seen that on a loop thousands of times. And then the other I would just say is the fundamentals of great management. I was actually talking to a CEO a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, managers, they either have it or they don't. Like they don't got it. And I was like, no, that's not. I strongly disagree with that. I think there are certain things that might come easier for people, but for the most part, management is a learned skill. And these great best practices in how do I give consistent and steady feedback so my employees aren't surprised? How do I clarify priorities every single week so like the work to be done is named and that employee knows where they stand? And how do I motivate a team of people? Like, how do I create a team that has momentum and life to it and vibrancy to it?
We've been talking about blind spots, and there's many blind spots that I work with as an executive coach with managers and directors and VPs and executives and CEOs and founders. But one that's really common across all of them is the confusion of managing the work versus leading the people. Managing the work are the conversations we have about quality, about KPIs, about next steps, and about addressing the issues and things that are in front of us. Leading the person is about the person. It's about their confidence. It's about overcoming fears, being dependent or independent. It's about their strategic thinking. Leading the person is very different than managing the work. And don't confuse the two, because that's the blind spot most people have. They see them as the same. Make sure you as a leader are spending time developing the people around you by leading the people, not just managing the work. Now back to Adam. Well, perfect segue in this leadership authenticity. I know that our team always does research on people that we bring on board here, and there's a difference between authenticity in theory versus authenticity in practice. What is that difference?
Yeah, I think this topic for me is super important because it's important to the workforce. Like, one of the biggest macro trends that happened for employees in general is that the workforce started to value the authenticity of leadership as one of the top values of the entire workforce. Like, I want to work for a leader that I believe is like an authentic person. And that would be merged with things like, I want to work for a company that does something meaningful. I want to have personal growth. Like, those are some of those value shifts that happen in the workforce. And I think in response to that, a lot of leaders were like, okay, great. Now I'm going to try to check a box and be like, I'm authentic. I'm doing the work. But I think the hard truth, and my book actually talks about this. I have a whole chapter on this topic, but like, there is no magic answer to becoming an authentic leader. It is genuinely the combination of doing the work to become an authentic person and applying solid leadership principles and tactics, and like finding that balance. But really, and I know this probably with your coaching practice, like a lot of the work you're doing is like ushering leaders on that journey to become an authentic person, to really examine themselves, what is going on their internals, and then how that then impacts their team with how they show up every day, right? And those leaders that get to know themselves well, who recognize the energy they bring and how they show up and how that impacts a team, those are the leaders who really are thriving right now, who are creating these teams of motivated people who are stretching and doing their best and kind of accomplishing exceptional things.
We keep mentioning the book, and I hate for the audience to be like, I wonder what book they're talking about. Lead Like a Human. And I think that writing a book is hard. We're actually writing a book now about tough conversations. Me and my wife co-authors together, which is also tough to write with someone else. But
not to mention your wife, tough conversations with your wife. Bravo. Yeah. That's like a marriage guide and a work field guide.
It is. And I will tell you, I screwed up last week. I did not pick the right timing for a conversation, and it wasn't really that tough, but it was literally, I was walking out the door and going, did you do this or that? Or we need to think about this. And it was bad form. And I came back home 2 hours later after going to the gym, and I was like, you know what? I messed up. I took some ownership of that. I pushed for a conversation. But all that aside, Adam, Lead Like a Human. Why did you have to write that book?
I felt like I had to write the book because I wanted to show the workforce that you actually can go on the journey of leadership and stay connected to who you are as a person, and actually, in fact, become more of who you are along the way. And when I kind of, my first business grew a lot faster than I was expecting. I was like, it's just two of us. I started with a college student and we went from 0 to 35 people in our first 8 months. And like, I'm a manager for the first time. And I just started replaying all the negative habits of the managers that I had before me. I had a moment kind of where this all started, where I was stressed out of my mind. I wanted the business to be successful more than anything in the world. And I'm in a Friday meeting with my team, and they're sharing their results, and like, I just like stormed out, and I just like wasn't showing up as that calm, steady presence who was creating safety for my team. And it was a wake up call for me. It was a wake up call that, like, for me to do this journey sustainably for decades, I have to do it in a way that is genuinely who I am. I have to uncover what it is about me that makes me frustrated. I have to uncover what my blind spots are. And I want to also build a team that feels both motivated and loyal and inspired. And so that's what, I mean, that is really what the concept of the book is. I thought the title just sort of came, like, I was just like, this is what it is. Like, it's a simple concept, but I want leaders to know that you can lead in an inspired way. You can lead as your true authentic self, and you can do it and build high performance teams too. It's not at the sacrifice of the other. It actually lifts the high performance up.
My take on authenticity and leadership is this, that you want to make sure that you look at each person as an individual. Now, Adam's already said that, but I'm putting a spotlight on it because I want you to look at each person and their ability to engage with others, their ability to think, their ability to make decisions, and how they relate to others. And you see everyone as individual. You can't just treat everyone the same. I know that seems like it's really fair, but there's an individual element to leadership that you've got to be aware of. And you got to ask yourself, where is this person? Where had they been? And all of the things that come with that, if you want to lead them powerfully. Back to Adam. I love the title because too often I find that leaders over focus and over index on the work, and the work is not human. The work is not emotional, and they're not really paying attention to leading individually, as you mentioned before, and they're not leading through authentic measures. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. Adam, I know that we could probably take this in many different directions, but I'm also curious too about your work with HR superstars. You have a podcast out there that's growing. What is this podcast about, and what are you learning as you have these conversations with these HR, experts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I came up originally through sales, and then I fell into HR more as recognizing that I really love culture and leadership. And so much of HR, like what it used to be, things like compensation, benefits, payroll, things like that, right? HR Superstars is about the new side of HR, what I call strategic HR. And it really is about elevating that whole profession, the profession of HR, and allowing HR leaders to earn their seat at the executive table. How can they do kind of the innovative work that they dreamed and not get blocked, and kind of build these high performance workforces? So that's what it's about. And it has a companion community to it too. We have over 7,000 folks in the community. We share resources every month. And really on the podcast, I interview authors, I interview practitioners who are kind of doing this work, and just have conversations about what it takes to kind of operationalize high performance cultures.
Great word, operationalize culture and high performance culture specifically. What are the keys to that?
It's funny is like, it feels like such a big topic, and it is. I could literally talk about this for hours, but like fundamentally, right? You need to have where you're going needs to be clear and inspiring. How you're going to get there needs to be motivating and achievable, like that perfect balance of like, this is ambitious, it's a little bit audacious, but it actually could be accomplished. You need to create regular feedback loops and regular forms of accountability and kind of put them on repeat. And you also need to make, I think fundamentally, to build a great culture that's high performance, you need to make the culture more than just what you do, like the technical things you accomplish, and you need to make it also how you do it, down to every single individual. Like when you're doing performance reviews, for example, and great cultures have activated core values that feel vibrant and alive. And when you actually assess employees, you're not just assessing them on, did you hit this goal? Did you achieve this metric, et cetera, et cetera? It's like, did you move inside the organization in a way that's aligned to the values of the organization as well? And so I'd say, that's a very simplistic version of it, but it's some combination of those things together that build great cultures.
Here's a tough question for you, Adam, and maybe you've thought about it. You do some reflection, but I'm assuming that you're always learning. You're always revisiting kind of your own core principles as it relates to leadership. What's an area that you feel like has changed recently? And it could be a big area, or it could be a small area. I'll give you an example. Some people say in the health world, intermittent fasting, they live by that. And then they start looking at it and it's like, well, maybe it doesn't work for me. And maybe I should operate differently. And they start eating differently and they realize it works differently for them. And so they think completely different. That's just an example. Is there an area of leadership that you've changed your thinking about that you can share with us?
That I'll just go real time, and one that I'm just thinking, like, I think I'm in process. I think I'm thinking about it and trying to sort it out, because when I wrote the book, I actually talked about, in books, like, you write them and then it's a physical copy, like it stays, but then the culture evolves. And I wrote this chapter on how kind of the workforce's values had changed from stability and compensation to things like leadership, authenticity, personal growth. And what's interesting, that was all really manifested through millennials impacting the entire workforce. But since I've written the book now, like 8% of the workforce is Gen Z already. And I think that there's this new value that's emerging, that's flexibility, that's work-life balance. And I'm processing through kind of what that looks like. How do you build high performance cultures and then recognize that this flexibility concept is just like with how millennials changed the values of the entire workforce? It wasn't just about millennials. Gen Z is now changing the entire values of the workforce. And so I think it's going to have a significant impact and effect on what leadership looks like and how you kind of lead in this new environment.
I think well said. I think a lot of people are living that too, because I've had a lot of conversations with my own clients and people are going, I've never had so many conversations lately about mental health. And as you probe into it, it's like, well, I need a little bit more flexibility. I need time away from this. And that when I grew up, I'm older than you, Adam, very clearly, but we didn't talk about mental health. We just worked. We worked hard. And I was really dedicated to, the companies I had for the first 10 years that I was working for, the big corporations, and startups, but also my own business. I just worked really, really hard. I didn't think about my own mental health. Now, was I not aware? I don't know, but I think now employees are aware of these things and they need it more. So as we wrap up today's conversation about authentic leadership, how are you wrapping authentic leadership into this understanding of these values changing in our workforce?
I do think the two parlay well together, because if you create an environment where you can talk candidly to your employees, where it's safe for them to bring up their failures, it's safe for them to bring what they're processing and working through, and you also are transparent with how you make your own decisions and you share behind the curtain. I think you can create these environments where real conversations happen. And where you're talking about things that are significant to everyone. And so my hope is that then by doing that, you can flex with the changing dynamics of the workforce as they come. But to your point, it is a challenging topic, like you just said with your own life. Like I think people are fundamentally reevaluating the role of work in their life right now at a macro level.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to watch. It's pretty fascinating. And then it's interesting for you and I who like talk about leadership. Like it's interesting to talk about leadership in that new context too.
I will tell you, I have a bias toward those CEOs who are like, well, we only are going to operate in the office. And I don't think that's the truth. I don't think that's the future. I mean, I do believe there's disadvantages from a career and a culture standpoint of only having virtual, but I believe in face-to-face so much. Maybe I'm old school, but I see that as a very important issue that we've got to wrestle with. And my clients that are dogged against it, I think it's a mistake. Adam, thank you so much for being here on the podcast, sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate it.
Wow, what a great interview with Adam. I really have a lot of respect for the work that he's done in creating a way to measure culture, but also to step back and look at authenticity and leadership and be willing to reflect and evolve in his own principles of leadership. I really love how all this came together. Hopefully you found it valuable. If there's anything that we as a team can do to help you grow your business, help you be the leaders that your team deserves, make sure you reach out to us. Happy to help. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of growth thinking. As always, they encourage. We'll see you next time.